Mr. Sarkisian, you testified before the CSC the other day on the post-election situation in Armenia. What were your impressions of the hearing?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share with you the views of the Armenian government on the latest events and on the hearings that took place in the Congress, because we do feel that there is certain gap of information that needs to be filled and addressed. Situations that has unfolded in Armenia is definitely not business as usual, and it was not supposed to be watched as business as usual, because when in a country on its way to democracy, you see people dying in the street as a result of clashes with the police. And when you see a post-electoral aftermath like the one we have in Armenia after the last presidential elections, obviously one understands that there is some problems that needs to be addressed, there is some issue that needs to be solved before we can move on as a society in a united and committed manner. So the aim of testimony in the U.S. Congress was to share with our American partners our vision on the events. The U.S. Congress has so-called Helsinki Commission, which was created immediately after the establishment of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe in 1975 with the Helsinki Final Act. And that commission is particularly designed to see how the OSCE partners fulfill their obligations within that organization, to build up on the achievements of Helsinki Final Act and to move on in terms of advancement of democracy. And we thought it's very logical that our American partners are concerned, that they want to hear from us, and they want to understand how the situation can impact U.S.-Armenia relations in general. And I want to tell you that I was very, very satisfied with the general setting of that hearing, because the issue was not taken out of context. It was a very wide discussion on the wide scope of U.S.-Armenia issues, and particularly with emphasis on Karabakh issue, where members of the Congress were very committed in asking the representatives of the State Department, who was testifying in that hearing, Under Secretary Bryza, about safeguards that can be put in place to protect Armenia in case of military aggression on part of Azerbaijan, and they were connecting this to the latest events. They understood that because of these events, the militaristic rhetoric in Azerbaijan is going up, and that there is a lot of attempt to take advantage of this situation, both in international organizations and in the military field, by other authorities, and they are concerned as our friends. We highly appreciated hearing that. And what I did, I tried to outline the scope. I tried to show the elections themselves, the aftermath, the violence, steps that need to be taken from now on to address what we have in the field as a result of all that, and how all this can affect us in our bilateral ties, including MCC, including the Millennium Challenge Corporation, including Karabakh settlements through OSCE Minsk Group, and wider U.S.-Armenia cooperation, which is very multidimensional today, as opposed to some 10 years ago, where we have a very extensive military-to-military dialogue, we have very effective security dialogue, we have a lot of economic cooperation in different fields, and this is very, very valuable. We need to work on this, and we need to further this and take full advantage of this situation.
Before going into the situation in Armenia, during the election, in the immediate aftermath of the election, I would like to ask a question about one of the issues that you raised right now, about the situation in Azerbaijan and how Azerbaijan is trying to capitalize on what is happening today in Armenia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an alphabetical. It's as easy as ABC. It is rooted in Machiavellian realpolitik type of thinking. When you see your adversary, I don't want to use the word enemy, because in contemporary international relations that word is not quite applicable, even though our Azeri neighbors very often refer to that word and even put it in their military doctrine, which was returned to them by NATO, by the way, because they said that the word enemy is not applicable to contemporary political jargon and lexicon, and I think that we shall ourselves use the word adversary, And when your adversary sees that you have an internal problem, he tries to take advantage for himself out of that. It's as simple in political science as ABC. I mean, it doesn't need any additional explanation. They have tried to do two things. One in the military field. It was a probe into the military sustainability of the armed forces and the border guards. And thanks God, the Armenian armed forces were capable to very quickly restore the situation, take it under full control. Meanwhile, they tried diplomatic efforts through the United Nations General Assembly resolution, which, while in legal terms null and void in terms of the legal authority, because UN General Assembly resolutions do not create law in international relations, but as a demonstration of willingness to use and capitalize, it's obvious. A different thing is that morally, if you look at that, and politically, if you look at that resolution, it's extremely weak, because the set of the countries which have joined on it, compared to the set of countries which decided to vote against it,
or abstain.
No, but and particularly against it, to vote against it, it's a very, very obvious demonstration of the real existing situation in the around the negotiations table on Karabakh. And I think it was very important also as a result to have that outcome which we had in those discussions in General Assembly.
Yes. And returning to the situation in Armenia, now I would like you, could you please give us some background about what broke out in the immediate aftermath of the elections, the demonstrations, the police crackdown, why it happened, how it happened, and why it got out of control, both underground and then after that in the media, and how it was. What are your thoughts on the media's reaction to this?
I want to make a very precise distinction on two phases of this, and I want us to be very careful in separating the elections from the aftermath. Because while there is a widespread opinion that it was the quality of elections that provoked the aftermath, I think that most experts would disagree on that. Because elections, while imperfect, they were not perfect elections, and we haven't had in Armenia perfect elections till now. But it's not unique about Armenia. Representative Hastings, who was chairing the Helsinki Commission hearing yesterday, the day before yesterday, he referred to his own experience in the state of Florida of this country, saying that elections in his state were as bad as it gets for a long time, and it was very recently that they really improved. In many states in this country, in many countries in Europe, elections got to the stage where they are now only a decade ago, or 2 decades ago, or 3 decades ago. And to expect from Armenia that overnight, in 16 years of independence, through 5 or 6 national elections, we would develop a substantial basis of doing perfect elections, it would be unfair. What really matters in this type of situation is the dynamics. And the dynamics has been very positive, both in terms of law and in terms of practice. In terms of law, we have developed a very liberal electoral code, which have been many times praised by the Council of Europe, Venice Commission, and OSCE, or Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, OSCE ODIHR, as a solid basis for conducting, and I'm citing them, quote unquote, it's a solid basis for conducting democratic elections. That electoral code was not written by us alone. We have done it in close cooperation with the best European experts, with the best European structures which are best fit to advise on that. And I do think we have a very good electoral code. I do think we have achieved a stage where we have put enough safeguards legally to protect the electoral process. And then it's all about implementation at this stage. It's about the quality of players. And I don't speak only about governmental players, because one shall understand that in Armenian electoral system, as opposite to that of many Western European states, the commissions, electoral commissions, are not run by the state. It's not civil servants who are running the elections. In France, for example, in Germany, in many Western European countries, it's the state officials, employees of one of the ministry, who run the elections, and then the state is responsible for their quality. In case of Armenia, electoral commissions are composed of representatives of political parties which have a faction in parliament, and then it's, in addition to those five, it's one representative of the president and two representatives of the judiciary. Now, in that context, the state has a certain limited capacity to arrange normal elections through its representatives, particularly, I mean, the judicial branch. The president, if he is well intended, he has a capacity, a limited capacity to impact through one representative, and then it's with the political parties to run good, normal elections. And what we have done a very extensive training program for the members of the commission to improve their quality and skills. We have done a major improvement of the voters' lists. And at these elections, it was only 100 people who restored their voting rights through courts. It's a very, very low number, because at our previous elections we used to have up to 10,000 or 15 or 20,000. So it's incomparable in that regard. The campaign period was very competitive, very open, with a lot of public rallies, with no single interference by the state. Media coverage, while probably could be better, and while we have heard some criticism about the media coverage, public television particularly, but we have seen also a very positive assessment of that by a European media group, which is called ECHO, which has done a research and has said that overall coverage was quite balanced. When you take print and broadcast media together, and you look at the media market in general, it was overall good.
There was a general approach, sorry for interrupting, that there was one specific candidate who was, in one way or the other, it was made sure that he does not get the airtime that he was, let's say, supposed to get. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's a wrong perception with regards to airtime, because he has received enough time, and I understand you refer to Levon Ter-Petrosyan. I want you to know he has declined 7 invitations by different TV stations to live broadcast, and he was asked to come himself or nominate anyone from his team to go, and they have not taken that. If someone has a limitation of time, if he needs more time, he usually does not put down a prime time political show invitation by key TV channels. So I think that is a test that can be applied. What I would agree on would be that probably he has received more negative coverage in substance than other candidates, but here we shall separate. Was it a editorial negative comment, or was it a negative comment by another candidate, or a public in the street, or someone else? I mean, Levon Ter-Petrosyan has left the political stage in Armenia with many, many negative impacts and many sad memories in public. And when 7 out of 9 candidates decided to speak negatively about him, it's not because someone has asked them to do that, it's because it's what the impression of Levon Ter-Petrosyan in political elite is. And you cannot curtail, let's say, Artashes Geramyan's interview because he's saying bad things about Ter-Petrosyan. That's what he thinks, that's how he wants to build his campaign, and that's what he is doing. In this country, you very often see candidates saying nasty things about each other, and you don't curtail their interviews. It's all broadcasted. So the issue of access to media shall be separated from the issue of the quality of the media coverage. And these are two different domains, of course.
So you wanted to talk about the pre-election and election period. And
so I was trying basically to say that the quality of elections, while imperfect, they were good. And there are 2 tests to any elections at the end of the day. One is domestic and one is international. The domestic test is the decision of the Central Electoral Commission and the decision of the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court, which is composed by judges mostly appointed by Ter-Petrosyan in his presidential tenure, has decided that elections are over. And in any country, any election has to have a full stop. If you don't have that political full stop, elections from a peaceful means of evolutionary change of power turn into an on-rolling revolution anywhere in the world. In this country, it's Supreme Court, and once it says it's over, it's over. Now, when in the beginning of the campaign, Petrosyan was asked, do you think you have won 96 presidential elections? He said, of course I have, because the Constitutional Court has said I have. Now, it's the same Constitutional Court with almost the same set of justices. I think it's right time now for President Petrosyan to recognize the outcome of elections and get over to the next stage of political dispute. Internationally, the test is the observers, and the observers have said that elections mostly met the standard. They did give a list of things which went wrong, and we work on that. Most of the things they say mirror our own findings, because our prosecutor's office was working, our commissions were working, and we did know about number of violations, but believe me, they were not as extensive as to change the outcome of elections. And that's what's said in the International Observers Report. So I think that that's why we should put aside the elections and their outcome, and now get into the aftermath. Why did that happen, and how this could be prevented?
Before talking about the aftermath, one more question about the monitors and the reports that they gave. We're talking, of course, about the international monitors, different groups. Now, there is, in some circles at least, a general mistrust and lack of trust regarding these reports, especially in Armenia and also in some circles in diaspora. Because and also questioning the fact that how these monitors, after seeing what happened in Armenia and after hearing the reports from other sources, came up with a conclusion that the elections were overall well managed.
Thank you, Khachki. It's a very good question. I think it has to do with the perception or misperception of the role of observers. I think the word observer very well represents the task of that group of people. They have to observe. There is a major difference between observation and inspection. When you are on an inspection mission, you have to find all the worst representations and facts and compose your opinion upon the worst practices. When you are an observer, you have to do a sampling. You watch in a sampling of things, and what you see you project across the country. Now, if you look at different reports of different elections in Armenia, you will see that the quality of reports has been consistently improving, because we have been working as a government very closely with OSCE observation team, telling them that you can observe everything you want, but you can report only things you have seen with your own eyes. Because in Armenian culture, the rumors have a significant role, and political rumors particularly. In the past, we have seen many reports of OSCE observation teams saying, we have heard, we were unable to prove or to check, but we have heard that. And on the basis of that, what they have heard, they would build up a conclusion about elections. We think this is inappropriate. They came to Armenia with a quite big team of 350 observers. They have been to any precinct they wish. There has been no limitation whatsoever. They have traveled extensively across the country. They have met all political forces, and they have been able to register across the country problems in 25 precincts total. When you just write out all the precinct numbers from their reports, it's 25 precincts. And in most of them, the problems are minor. For example, they refer to 4 precincts where the voters' turnout was close to 100%. They didn't even ask us, because if they did, they would know that in these 4 precincts there has been military voting. And when you have military unit voting, you do have a percentage going up, because they are not permanently registered in that address, and obviously the initial list is composed from locally registered residents only. So it can be even above 200%, and it would be perfectly fine. In one of the precincts out of 25 which they have reported, we have checked and seen that their observers were not present at all. So their knowledge of that is again based upon hearing something from someone, but it's not a sufficient basis to make a conclusion. So the outcome of their findings, that the elections mostly meet the standards, I think represent what they saw on the ground and what they felt. When they came out with a preliminary conclusion, Petrosyan said, "You are naive." They said we are not. We have been to many countries, we have observed many elections, we have looked into the facts carefully, we have seen many violations, but we do insist that elections were mostly in line with the standard, and they said it in their interim report after the preliminary one. Ter-Petrosyan said, well, then you are bright. He went as far as to say that he has seen copies of paychecks to the head of OSCE Audio Observation Mission, who assumingly has received 20,000 euros for giving a positive assessment. It was a major offense, because the man of dignity, a German diplomat, Ambassador Ahrens, who was leading the mission, was outraged at that, because I understand he is a person of high moral integrity, and for him to hear that was a very shocking reality. So that's it. That is the test, and that's how I would answer your question about observers.
Now, what is the Armenian government's take on what happened, let's say, in the aftermath, the second phase that you wanted to differentiate from the first one?
Before the voting day, one of the candidates, Ter-Petrosyan, has announced that he has won. 2 weeks before the voting day, he said, I have won the elections. This is just technical registration of the fact. On the voting day, he said, I have 99%, and he announced that next day he will hold victory or protest rally. In other words, he said, if I don't win the elections, it means the elections are rigged. And at that rally, he got out and said, I have 65%. I am an elected president. The Opera Square is my residence. I'm going to be here until people carry me to the presidential palace. He started to promulgate presidential decrees and orders, but most dangerously, an ex-commander-in-chief of the armed forces tried to drag the army into the internal political conflict. He was speaking about 2 deputy ministers of defense joining his ranks. He was speaking about army being with them. He tried to drag Yerkrapa Union of Veterans of Karabakh War, who objectively could have possessed many legal and illegal weapons, into the conflict. And I think that was the most dangerous, illegal, and unpeaceful thing to do. That's why when we very often hear that Ter-Petrosyan was holding peaceful rallies and all of a sudden police cracked down on them, I think there shall be a whole difference in the world between a peaceful rally and a non-violent rally. And while Ter-Petrosyan's rallies were non-violent in terms of that they were not throwing stones at windows of the stores or apartments, they were not peaceful, because all the preparation that was underway, events that were unfolding on February the 23rd, when President Kocharan was out of country for a CIS summit, they were everything but being peaceful. And I think that there were 2 approaches that were discussed. One of them was to crack on the demonstration and disperse it because it was an authorized rally. And the other was, even if it's unauthorized, it's a democratic expression of will of the people. It's a freedom of speech. You should not interfere. And we decided not to interfere for some period of time. Then we started to receive information about the accumulation of arms and weapons and explosives. And the police and National Security Service were able to identify possession of illegal arms in many key figures organizing those rallies. And some people were even arrested, which was duly reported on TV and through media. And then on the eve of March the 1st, we received, our police forces received live data, verifiable data, that in the tents at the Opera Square there are weapons and there are explosives. It was their duty to search for those weapons and explosives. Because if next day, on March the 1st, something would go out, an explosive would go out at the square where there was a public rally in support of Ter-Petrosyan, it would be a tremendous blow to the democracy and stability and advancement of the country. So they had to do a search. They came without shields, without helmets, without even, they were unarmed, without even ribbon batons. They just approached for a search. And they received a very aggressive reaction of the crowd, with Molotov cocktails, with metallic bars. It happens. It happens everywhere. I mean, you see it in Germany, you see it in Austria, you see it in any country of the world. You see it very often in this very country. when riots get violent. And it's not because people who are in the riots are necessarily nasty and bad people, but because that's the psychology of a crowd. It's a different type. A human being at his home and a human being in a crowd is a very different type of person. It's a psychologically different personage. So it became very violent, and the police had no choice but to disperse that gathering at the Opera Square. And there were about 900 people there. Police didn't use any special means except for the plastic, or how you call it, ribbon batons. And there were no major health injuries as a result of all that. In other words, the operation undertaken by police went well, more or less. But then you know that a group of people decided to regroup and regather in front of Shaumian Square. And it got very, very dangerous, it got very violent, it got unacceptable when people, and it's all video recorded, so there is sufficient evidence of that, when crowds of people just trace and catch unarmed police officers and servicemen and beat them in groups, in mobs, when they attack the public and private buildings and vehicles and put on fire cars of ambulances. And at that very time, President Petrosyan rejecting to receive Catholicos Karaginis II, rejecting to receive Parvin Harikan, who you know is more or less a neutral politician with a past Soviet dissident background, and he refuses to see them. He thinks, in my view, that the momentum is there and that it is close, yeah. And he asks his supporters to stay in the square, even though they have agreed to the offering of police to change their location to a more secure place. And everything was telling that he thinks that he has the momentum. And after that, when in the evening President was briefed about 8 wounded police officers and servicemen with firearms, firearm wounds and explosive caused wounds, and when he learned of 1 killed police officer, he had no other choice than to declare the state of emergency. And it was the last resort. I mean, I hope everyone understands that for any outgoing president, it would be the last thing he would wish to do, to end his tenure of presidency with a state of emergency, with limitations of rights. But I was in the office when he asked to prepare that order of state of emergency, and I want to assure you that his initial command was do everything to limit the impact of state of emergency on the regular life of the city. And when someone asked about the curfew, because you know that usually state of emergency is also envisions curfew, he said, absolutely unacceptable. He said, it's absolutely unacceptable to impose a curfew on the capital city if we can live without it. And we can live without it. And that's how we came about with the decrees that had limitation on 7 basic rights. 2 of them were never used, two of the limitations. 5 of them were twice eased throughout the state of emergency 20-day period. And evaluating this, looking back, we think that this was a necessary step to ease the tension, to calm the tension. It's not nice. State of emergency is not supposed to be nice. It's not invented to be life as usual. The very name of it, emergency, tells us that it's about when the time is critical. And the time was critical.
My question would be specifically, at least a few of these points that you're referring to were criticized, especially regarding the media and what the limitations on the media. This was received very badly, both in Armenia and in the diaspora, as well as in some circles in the international community, if not all. Now, looking back, does your government, does the Armenian government think that there would have been a better way, especially when we're talking about the media restrictions, of dealing with the situation at that point?
It's too early to say. In this country, 30 years have passed since Attica uprising, which was by exercise books the most exemplary case, probably, of a clash between the police and its own people on different grounds, though, because it was a prison uprising. But still, and even today, 30 years after that, it's very difficult to say what if something would have been done differently, because history doesn't take the ifs. It has been done. Legally, I think we have done everything correctly. The European Convention on Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights allow for limitations on freedom of media at the time of state of emergency. Our Constitution allows that too. So I don't think there has been a legal problem. Politically, it will take time to decide. It will be a political test which will be applied to the situation to reveal if this was a right decision or wrong. But I can tell you what motivated that decision. Most of media in Armenia is polarized. There is no such thing, in my view, as truly balanced, independent media. The freedom of speech not necessarily leads to overnight emergence of free media. Free media is a very complex animal with many motivations and backgrounds and issues. But media that we have in Armenia was either pro or con, and the media that was supporting in this situation, in Petrosyan's campaign, particularly a number of newspapers, they took a form of a political leaflet. It was a political leaflet published in the form of a newspaper. And then the state decided it would be better not to have it for some period of time. And then on the 13th day of the state of emergency, the president eased that restriction, after which number of media returned to the domain, including Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which decided to broadcast after March 13th. So it is legal limitations that was placed in place with significant political impacts, which have to be evaluated in the future.
At this point, what steps is the Armenian government taking? What steps? What is the vision of the president? Many people, even in the government, even in the in circles close to the government, they have said that mistakes have been committed. You yourself have talked about mistakes being committed and the importance to address those mistakes. What is the vision, and is there a certain kind of timetable to actually show the people who are approaching this entire issue with mistrust, that something is changing, is going to change in the future?
It's very important. It's probably the most important question today, because if our society and if our country is to succeed, can be done only under very strong feeling of national unity, not only in Armenia but also in diaspora. That's the destiny of these people. There is no alternative to that. There is no doubt about that. Now, if you look to this through political science perspective, presidential elections are very different from parliamentary ones. In presidential, the winner takes it all. And Petrosyan opted not to participate in parliamentary elections, and he has lost presidential ones. By the rules of the game, he has to leave the political scene now. But because the country is in a transitional country, and because certain mechanisms of political sanction do not function yet properly, he has decided to stay and to continue to mobilize public attention around himself. And President Sarksian, in my view, has done a very courageous step on February 26th, a week after the elections, before this aftermath, when he offered a hand of cooperation, when he said, we have been on different sides of barricades, now we need to unite, and I offer you to discuss anything up to a coalition government. Well, that hand was shaken by most of the opposition representatives, by all other candidates for presidency, but one of them, Petrosyan, decided to opt out and decided to confront this. President Sarksian has continued his offer in public interviews and most importantly at the inauguration. As a symbolic gesture, he also invited President Petrosyan to participate in that inauguration, which he didn't do. He decided not to be there. Now, that offering is still open and valid. I'm sure that if Petrosyan tomorrow comes to President Sarkisian and says that he wants to sit down and work and discuss substantial issues of how to make Armenia a better place to live, I'm sure he would be happy to do that. Now, if that discussion has to be about some artificial settings, for example, arranging new parliamentary elections or additional presidential election voting or anything, obviously that's not going to work because it's out of logic and it's out of the context. So it's very important to identify the basis of such negotiations, and in my view this can be only about the substance of Armenia's advancement. As far as the timetable is concerned for steps, it's very tight, and I know that President Sarkisian and the government, the new Prime Minister, very well understand that every moment we have to deliver now, and we have to deliver results that will be trusted and that will be visible and that will make life of a citizen improved. I don't speak even about socio-economic because in that regard Armenia is doing a steady progress, and if the ambitious program of this year budget of $2.5 billion is fulfilled, I think it will be a major breakthrough for socio-economic problems in the country. But I mean more in terms of feeling of legal protection. We have achieved a stage, thanks God, in our country where the middle class is being formed. And this is a class of people who are in small and medium businesses, because 45% of Armenia's GDP is produced in small and medium businesses. It's very significant, it's very high. Economically, it's not very good because one giant factory could give you more GDP than this 45% of small. But politically, this is fantastic because only these people can be a basis for a true democracy in a country. Democracy doesn't come from up-down, it comes from grassroots, always. And democracy starts in school. When you take your children to school and you care about the quality of education there through school council and you are able to impact, that's where the democracy starts. And that's the grassroots democracy. Everything else is building up on it because you need a change of generation of politicians to have this new mindset of a free, absolutely open competition in the political domain. It can't happen overnight. So the solution to this situation is a very hard work that the government has to offer, and it has to be very clear to the public that the government is excessively using all its resources to improve the quality of law obedience in the country, of social justice, of legal justice. Then the life will be better, and then the country will change. And I think that the situation with the tension in the society will ease. That's the only way. Very often I get a question from my friends who want to take their children to English classes. They say, where can I have my son or daughter learn good TOEFL? Because TOEFL is a test which foreign students usually take to prove their knowledge of English. And I say, if you want your children to know English, you don't need to train them for TOEFL. You need to train them for English. And then when they know good English, they will easily take a good TOEFL. Projecting this to political life, you cannot prepare your country for democracy. You have to build up liberalism in your country. And when you have enough liberalism, the democratic test is easily met. Otherwise, it's always a substitution. It's always a surrogate of democracy, which is not what we want, actually.
My final question is sort of following up on this. Again, at this point, with the formation of the government, we're still at the early stages of setting the agenda for what is going to come. And there are obviously, as you said, there are a lot of expectations, and there are fears that not much is going to change. What steps are being taken at this point, even in the formation of the government and otherwise, to actually try to relieve these fears, especially since there are, predating the elections, during the campaigns, etc., several oligarchs, etc., have had their important share in the elections, and now it's time where the government, the leadership, has to decide whether how to actually which way to follow, to actually reward those who support.
But you actually answered your own question, because yes, the government and the president and the prime minister, they have to decide where do they take the political risk, where do they take the interpersonal risk. It's a very complex decision making always. All nominations and all appointments, not only in Armenia, in any country, they are a very, very heavy part of the game in politics. And because the situation is tense, I think that everyone is quite careful in each nomination and each appointment, because people realize that you need a substantial human resource to implement a very ambitious program of reform and advancement of the country. And that's what I think the President and Prime Minister are right now doing, forming the new cabinet in a way which will be reliable, trusted, high quality. So we'll see. It will take time, and I think that the first 100 days of the government will be very important to see how they are able to deliver what they are expected to in this short period of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarksian.
Thank you very much.